Life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 with Neil Johnson on Vision.
The next state election looming is on in Victoria late next month on the 26th of November. Christian-based groups are involved in highlighting issues for Victorian voters, and a new dynamic is emerging in the form of mobile phone accessible online how-to-vote cards. In Victoria, the outfit called Cause says there's a situation where a voter might vote for a party they support, but ultimately that vote may well end up going towards a party they never voted for. Cause is aiming to serve Christian conservative voters by providing mobile phone accessible how-to-vote cards that will preference Christian conservative politicians regardless of what party they belong to. Ed Sparrius leads Cause, and Ed's joining us. Ed, welcome along to 2020.
Hello, Neil. Thank you very much for talking to us again and to your listeners.
Ed, preferences being manipulative, this is not new. You're hoping to make it easier for conservative Christians to make their vote count.
That's the case. Look, most people aren't aware that, particularly in the upper house, we have a group voting ticket arrangement, and that group voting ticket allows politicians of different persuasions to get together. And they preference each other in different regions, and you might vote for a very conservative politician, you think, and ultimately what you actually end up doing is voting in a politician that you would never ever have thought that you would voted for, simply because you tick the little box above the line in our voting system.
Let's just focus for a moment on how it works. The Turning Point How to Vote cards, they're going to show how to fill in your voting form, preferencing the best conservative candidates in each location. But what you're saying is not necessarily party preference.
Yeah, so the alternative to ticking one little box above the line is to tick a whole pile of boxes under the line, and they represent different candidates who are trying to get you a vote. And depending on the order they get ticked in, you end up with either a very conservative politician ultimately, or candidate becoming a politician, or you end up the other direction. And so what that really means is the individual voter has really got to sit down and investigate every politician that's in their region. Now, in the upper areas, that could be anything up to 80 different people. And the reality is most people just simply don't have the time or don't understand how to go about it, and they get to the polling booth and they go, well, I'll just tick it over the line, and that's what's creating our problem. And so Turning Point is an offshoot of Turning Point USA with people like Ben Shapano and other people over there, the conservative speakers you see on Facebook. And so what they're doing here for us in Victoria, they did in the federal election, but they're doing it here and really concentrating on it. They will give for every region and every electorate, they will fill out how to vote cards that will preference the preferable religious, and I'm saying religious, I mean Christian mainly, and conservative politicians in that region. So all you need to do is you go to their website, you type in your address, and up pops the how to vote card with the candidates in order that will best suit our needs as Christians and other religious groups.
Now, these were used in the last federal election, as I understand it, and it's been adapted now to be used in Victoria. Is that the case?
Yep, very much so. Yeah, the federal election was their first go at it, and this is now for Victoria. A lot of work for these guys because with the pre-polling that comes out, most of the names don't really appear on the Victoria Electoral Commission website till a couple of days before the pre-polling, so there's going to be a few sleepless nights while they work through all the candidates and get them in order.
Cause, the organisation that you lead, Ed, you're interested in family values, and so when we talk about Christians and conservatives, family values matter, restoring Victoria, this is the sort of thing that Cause has been interested in for a long time.
Very much, yep. We got involved with the Safe Schools stuff, the gender teaching in schools, which, by the way, is now, and it's really got its teeth set in Victoria here. Dan Andrews is now putting it into kindergarten. So even little kiddies of 3 and 4 year old get told that maybe they're the wrong sex and they should be boys when they're girls and vice versa. There's no sexual morality at all. Abortion is given to kids in schools as a potential option, as a way of having contraception. You get pregnant, you just get rid of it. We've got conversion therapy laws here that stop people who want out of the LGBT life from being able to get help. I mean, if they go to a pastor and say, I really, really need help, and he prays with them, he faces 10 years of jail. Or a parent has a child come home from school and says, Mum, I'm actually a boy, not a girl, and Mum goes, don't be silly, she could actually lose her child. That's where we're at in Victoria. And so all these real serious problems. There's more laws coming that will mean that if a pastor stands up in a church and says marriage is between a man and a woman and a gay couple are there, they can take offence to that. And this is something that's on the cards where you could get taken to court for having simply said marriage is between a man and a woman. We've really got to change this government here.
In some sense, some will say this might be a last chance. You are trying to connect with the leaders of Christian churches and denominations. You want faith leaders to attend a webinar that you've got coming up. If the leaders don't get behind it, you'll be pushing uphill here, but you want leaders to actually get involved in a webinar so they can understand how this process works of helping people vote for the right candidate.
Yep. So we've got a webinar that we've organised. We've got Bernie Finn from the DLP, Lyle Shelton from Family First, Warren Pickering from One Nation, and Aidan McLinton from the Freedom Party. They'll all give a short talk on their policies and where they stand on all this. And what we are setting up is the webinar is something you need to register for, and you then register and you get approved and you can join. The webinar has a Q&A function to it, so we're looking for leaders of churches who can come along and other religious organisations, come along, register, be part of this, and at the end of the presentation and the Turning Point presentation, they can then ask questions. But there's also, we're going to stream it on Facebook and YouTube, people just to watch. And the reason we've done it that way is we don't want to get hit by hundreds of trolls bombarding the Q&A section. So we'll restrict that to the religious leaders, and then anyone else can watch on the other. The Facebook will be on the Turning Point website, and the YouTube will be coming from Cause. And there may also be some other YouTubes that we will be streaming, but we'll announce it on the day.
Ed, let me ask you about something that's quite controversial. The thought that there are candidates or parties who are paying big dollars to, in some ways, manipulate our preferential voting system, sort of secretive vote preferencing. What are you able to share with us about what you understand happens on a lot of levels when an election comes around these days?
Yeah, look, that's very true, and there's some different opinions on it. It's a system that our government is aware of. It's a system that's been there for a long time. A particular businessman has seen an opportunity to make some money out of this. It's not illegal what he's doing, and the fact is any party could join, whether they're Conservative or other parties can join. But in the past, non-Conservative, the Conservative parties have said, look, we don't want to be paying for people's votes, and they've avoided being part of this. And for that reason, we've ended up with a number of senators in the upper house who've wreaked havoc with our faith communities because of this particular arrangement. And that is exactly what we're trying to undermine, if you want to use that word, or deconstruct with this system here, because nobody knows where the preferences go in that group till 2 or 3 days before the election, before the polling, sorry. And the fact is most people aren't aware of that they can actually see how this is set up. They're not aware of the arrangement. And in the past, as I said, people have voted for perfectly good, or they thought perfectly good candidates, and their votes have ended up going to people who they would never ever in a million years vote for. So what we're giving them through Turning Point is the option to vote solidly for good Christian conservative candidates across the board.
So it's a matter of being wise with the way preferences work when you cast your vote. Now, the webinar, just come back to that for a moment. You want faith leaders leaders of churches, and no doubt leaders within churches, not necessarily just the senior leader, but people who are interested in the politics, to register beforehand. And we're going to give a email address in just a moment, so it's not a website address, an email address. And Ed, some of the things that are going to be shared could be quite sensitive, and that's why you want people to pre-register.
No, we want you to pre-register so that it stops from the Q&A section from being bombarded by endless trolls who are trying to give us a hard time by asking silly questions and filling up the question and answer section with rubbish. So if we have faith leaders, we can be sure the questions will be reasonable and good questions that can be asked of the presenters and have good answers given to.
Well, here's that email address, and listeners might want to jot this down and flick an email to your church leadership for an invitation to be a part of the webinar. Here's the email link, cause, that's C-A-U-S-E, cause.victoria@gmail.com. cause.victoria@gmail.com. Ed Sparrius, who leads Cause, and we've been talking about this new process under the Turning Point How to Vote cards. Ed, thanks so much for sharing this insight with us today on 2020.
Thank you very much for your time, Neil, and to your listeners. God bless.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.